For decades, researchers have been trying to communicate with Bigfoot. But have you ever wondered who he is trying to communicate with? These audio recordings might just answer that question.
59 seconds. That is all the footage contains. 59 seconds of grainy 16mm film, shot in a remote California forest in 1967. A large, hair-covered creature walks upright through a clearing, glances back toward the camera, and then disappears into the trees. Less than 1 minute of footage. Yet, for more than half a century, it has remained one of the most controversial mysteries ever recorded. The Patterson-Gimlin film has been examined by scientists, challenged by skeptics, defended by believers, studied by Hollywood special effects experts, and debated by researchers around the world. Some insist it is nothing more than a man in a costume. Others believe it may be the only genuine footage ever captured of an unknown species living hidden within North America's vast wilderness. For 57 years, neither side could prove its case. Believers could not provide a body, bones, or DNA. Skeptics could not produce the suit, identify the person inside it with certainty, or recreate footage that perfectly matched what was captured that day. The mystery remained unsolved. But now something has changed. Modern artificial intelligence has been used to analyze the original film frame by frame. It measured movement, studied proportions, examined textures, modeled physics, and compared the footage against human biomechanics, known primates, and costume designs. What it discovered was unexpected. The analysis did not confirm a hoax. Instead, it revealed details that many experts believe should not exist if the creature were simply a man wearing a suit. And the results are reopening one of the greatest debates in cryptozoological history. Before we uncover what the AI found, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the evidence you're about to see may completely change the way you view the most famous Bigfoot footage ever recorded. The Patterson-Gimlin film may be far more important than anyone imagined, and we may have been wrong to dismiss it for all these years. Long before Roger Patterson ever pointed a camera toward the wilderness, stories about mysterious human-like creatures were already deeply rooted across North America. For countless generations, indigenous communities spoke of large, hairy beings that lived far from civilization, hidden within dense forests and rugged mountain ranges. Among the peoples of the Pacific Northwest, these creatures were known as Sasquatch, a name that would eventually become famous around the world. Other tribes had different names for them. Some called them Skookum. Others used names such as Te Sime Shui Ez. Despite the differences in language, the descriptions were remarkably similar. Witnesses described towering creatures covered in hair, walking upright on two legs, possessing immense strength, and looking human-like, yet clearly not human. What makes these stories particularly interesting is that they were not told as myths or fairy tales. They were spoken of as real creatures that shared the wilderness with people. They were viewed as elusive, powerful, and potentially dangerous beings that were best left alone. To those who lived closest to the land, these accounts were practical warnings rather than legends. Even more intriguing was the consistency of the descriptions. Communities separated by great distances, many with little or no contact with one another, often described nearly identical creatures, large bipedal beings, forest dwellers, secretive but powerful, real enough to be respected and feared. When European settlers arrived, most dismissed these accounts as folklore or superstition. To many, the stories were simply the result of misunderstanding the natural world. But events in the decades that followed would cause some people to reconsider that assumption. During the 1950s, strange discoveries began attracting attention in the forests of Northern California. Road construction crews working deep in remote wilderness areas started finding enormous footprints unlike anything they had seen before. The tracks looked human in shape, but they were far larger than any normal human footprint. Many measured between 15 and 17 inches in length. Some were pressed so deeply into the ground that they suggested an exceptionally heavy creature had left them behind. These weren't reports from people searching for monsters. They were observations made by workers carrying out routine jobs in isolated areas. One of the most significant discoveries occurred in 1958, when a bulldozer operator named Jerry Crew found a series of unusual tracks near Bluff Creek, California. Crew made plaster casts of the footprints and brought them to a local newspaper. The newspaper published the story, and in doing so, it introduced a name that would become legendary: Bigfoot. The nickname quickly spread across the country and became permanently linked to the mystery. As public interest grew, reports from the Bluff Creek region multiplied. Witnesses claimed to see large figures moving through the forest. Strange footprints appeared repeatedly. Broken branches and unexplained disturbances added to the growing mystery. The remote wilderness around Bluff Creek soon became the center of Bigfoot investigations. One man following these reports closely was Roger Patterson. Patterson was a rodeo performer, inventor, and enthusiastic explorer from Washington State. Fascinated by the growing number of sightings, he became convinced the mystery deserved serious attention. In 1966, he even published a book collecting reports and arguing that the creature could be real. Unlike many observers, Patterson wasn't content simply to discuss the phenomenon. He wanted proof. More specifically, he wanted film evidence. A year later, he would get the opportunity he had been hoping for. In October 1967, Patterson and his friend Bob Gimlin traveled to Bluff Creek with a specific goal: finding evidence of Bigfoot. They brought horses to help navigate the difficult terrain, and Patterson carried a rented 16mm movie camera loaded with Kodachrome film. Their purpose was clear: they were searching for the creature. Critics would later point to this fact as evidence that Patterson may have planned a hoax from the beginning. Supporters argued the opposite, saying that bringing a camera while investigating reported sightings was simply common sense. That disagreement would become one of the central debates surrounding the film. Then came October 20th, 1967, a day that would become one of the most discussed dates in cryptozoological history. That afternoon, Patterson and Gimlin were riding along Bluff Creek through a remote section of forest. The area was rugged, heavily wooded, and isolated. As they rounded a bend, something unexpected happened. Their horses suddenly became agitated. Patterson's horse reportedly reared, throwing him to the ground, while Gimlin struggled to keep control of his own mount. Then they saw it. Across the creek, a large figure was moving through the trees. It was upright, massive, and unlike anything they expected to encounter. Patterson quickly grabbed his camera and began filming. The opening moments of the footage are shaky and unstable, exactly what you might expect from someone running across uneven ground while trying to capture a once-in-a-lifetime sighting. But after a few moments, the image steadies. The figure becomes clearly visible. It walks away from the camera at a calm, deliberate pace. The body appears broad and muscular. Long arms swing naturally at its sides. Dark hair covers the entire figure from head to toe. Its posture seems unusual, with bent legs and a stride that many researchers have argued differs from normal human movement. The creature does not appear frightened. It does not charge. It does not run. It simply continues walking. Then comes the moment that would become legendary: a single glance. As it moves away, the figure briefly turns its head toward the camera. This famous image, known to researchers as Frame 352, remains one of the most analyzed moments in the entire film. For an instant, the face becomes visible. The expression is difficult to interpret. The creature appears to acknowledge the camera's presence before turning away and continuing toward the forest. Moments later, it disappears from view. Throughout the encounter, Gimlin remained mounted on his horse with a rifle ready, prepared to defend himself if necessary. No confrontation ever occurred. The creature simply walked away. The sighting itself lasted less than 2 minutes. The usable film footage totaled only 59 seconds. Afterward, Patterson and Gimlin examined the location where the figure had traveled. There, they discovered large footprints pressed into the sand and mud. The tracks measured roughly 14 inches long and displayed distinct toe impressions. Patterson created plaster casts of several prints, preserving them for later study. Researchers who examined the casts noted unusual features, including what appeared to be flexibility in the middle of the foot, something different from the rigid arch structure found in typical human footprints. To some investigators, the tracks suggested a heavy creature, unlike any known North American animal. When the film was finally shown to the public, controversy erupted almost immediately. Supporters believed they were witnessing the strongest evidence ever recorded for the existence of Bigfoot. For the first time, there appeared to be moving footage showing the creature alive in its natural environment. The film seemed to reveal details that were difficult to dismiss. The hair appeared to move naturally with the body's motion, rather than behaving like stiff costume material. Some observers believed they could see muscles shifting beneath the surface as the figure walked. Movements around the thighs, shoulders, and lower body gave the impression of a living creature rather than someone simply wearing a suit. There appeared to be movement beneath the creature's fur as it walked. Subtle shifts around the thighs, hips, and lower back gave the impression of real musculature rather than padding hidden beneath a costume. Its body proportions also raised questions. The arms seemed unusually long. The shoulders appeared exceptionally broad. The legs looked shorter than expected when compared to the torso. Even the way it moved stood out. Instead of the typical up and down motion seen in human walking, the figure displayed a smooth, flowing stride that allowed it to cover ground efficiently with very little visible bounce. To believers, these details were significant. They argued that no costume available in 1967 could have produced such convincing results. The footage appeared too detailed, the movement too lifelike, and the anatomy too consistent to be dismissed as a simple hoax. In their view, the film captured a genuine unknown creature. Skeptics, however, reached a very different conclusion. To them, the circumstances surrounding the encounter seemed suspicious from the start. Roger Patterson had spent years searching for evidence of Bigfoot. Then, after actively pursuing the creature, he suddenly managed to film one. The figure in the footage did not behave like a frightened animal. It didn't run. It didn't act aggressively. Instead, it calmly walked away at the perfect pace for the camera to record. Critics argued that this looked less like a chance encounter and more like a carefully planned scene. The footage itself seemed conveniently imperfect, not clear enough to settle the debate, not detailed enough to expose a costume, and not long enough to allow thorough examination. For skeptics, the situation raised obvious questions. Patterson had experienced financial difficulties. A sensational discovery could generate publicity, income, and attention. He had also published a book about Bigfoot. Capturing film footage would naturally increase interest in both the mystery and his work. Most importantly, he had arrived at Bluff Creek specifically hoping to film Bigfoot, and somehow succeeded. To critics, the explanation seemed straightforward. A man determined to obtain Bigfoot footage got exactly what he wanted because he created it. In this version of events, the creature was nothing more than a person wearing a costume and performing for the camera. As the years passed, both sides became firmly entrenched in their positions. Then, in 2002, the controversy took an unexpected turn. A man named Bob Hieronymus publicly claimed that he was the individual inside the famous Bigfoot suit. According to Hieronymus, Patterson had approached him before the filming expedition and offered him money to wear a costume and walk through the forest while being recorded. He also stated that the suit had originated from Philip Morris, a costume supplier from North Carolina known for producing gorilla outfits for fairs, carnivals, and promotional events. Adding fuel to the story, Morris acknowledged that he had sold Patterson a gorilla suit before the famous filming. To many observers, the mystery appeared solved. A supposed participant had confessed. A costume seller had supported part of the account. Case closed, or so it seemed. The problem was that the story wasn't as solid as it first appeared. Over time, details in Hieronymus's account changed. Certain aspects of his recollections shifted from one interview to another. Some statements conflicted with evidence connected to the original event, and one major issue remained unresolved. Where was the suit? If the film truly depicted a man wearing a costume, that costume should have existed somewhere. A prop capable of creating one of the most famous pieces of footage in history would likely have been preserved, examined, or displayed. Yet no such suit was ever produced. There was another complication. The gorilla costumes available during that era looked exactly like gorilla costumes. They did not resemble the figures seen in the Patterson-Gimlin film. The proportions didn't match. The body shape didn't match. The movement certainly didn't match. Numerous attempts were later made to recreate the footage using technology and costume materials available during the late 1960s. The results were disappointing. The recreated suits looked artificial. The movements looked human, and none of the demonstrations fully captured the appearance of the original film. Ironically, many of these recreations ended up strengthening the arguments of believers rather than weakening them. They highlighted how difficult it was to reproduce what appeared on screen. Another important factor was Bob Gimlin. Unlike Patterson, Gimlin never admitted that the encounter had been staged. Throughout decades of interviews and investigations, he consistently maintained the same position. According to Gimlin, what they saw that day was real. He insisted there had been no deception. His testimony carried weight because he had far less to gain from the film's success. He wasn't promoting a book. He wasn't building a career around Bigfoot research. He received little financial benefit from the controversy. That consistency created a challenge for those arguing the hoax theory. If the encounter was fabricated, then either Gimlin somehow remained unaware of an elaborate setup orchestrated by Patterson, or he successfully maintained the same false story for more than 50 years. Neither possibility seemed entirely convincing. And so, the mystery endured. Year after year, the film continued to be studied, debated, and analyzed. The creature kept walking through that California clearing, frame by frame, generation after generation. Never fully proven, never fully disproven. Then came a new development: artificial intelligence. In 2026, researchers used advanced AI systems to examine the highest quality digital versions of the Patterson-Gimlin film available. The approach was designed to minimize bias. The AI was not given background information about Bigfoot. It wasn't told about decades of arguments. It wasn't informed about believers or skeptics. Instead, it was simply presented with visual footage and instructed to analyze what appeared on screen. The investigation was remarkably detailed. Every frame was examined individually. The system tracked movement patterns throughout the sequence, measuring stride length, arm motion, hip rotation, shoulder mechanics, and overall locomotion. Researchers also analyzed how the figure's center of gravity shifted during movement, an important factor for understanding body structure and biomechanics. The AI compared limb proportions, torso dimensions, and body ratios against databases containing measurements from humans and known primate species. Additional analysis focused on the surface covering itself. The system examined the appearance and behavior of the hair or fur visible throughout the footage. It searched for signs of artificial construction, studying texture, density, and movement patterns. Lighting behavior was analyzed as well. Algorithms evaluated how shadows and illumination interacted with the figure's surface, looking for inconsistencies that might reveal costume materials. Other systems searched specifically for evidence of fabrication: seams, zippers, mask edges, attachment points, anything suggesting that multiple costume components had been assembled together. The process took weeks. When the results arrived, many researchers were surprised. The AI reported no visible indicators of costume construction, no seams, no obvious zippers, no detectable mask boundaries, no clear signs that the figure was composed of separate artificial pieces. Perhaps even more intriguing was the fur analysis. According to the system, the surface covering behaved in ways more consistent, with hair growing naturally from skin than with synthetic fur attached to fabric. As the figure moved, the hair shifted and responded dynamically to body motion and airflow. The patterns resembled the behavior expected from real biological material. Artificial fur typically reacts differently. It hangs differently. It moves differently. And according to the analysis, those differences were noticeable. The AI flagged this observation as one of the most unusual findings in the entire investigation. But the most controversial conclusions were still to come. The biomechanical analysis would soon become the center of an entirely new debate. What happened next was perhaps the most surprising part of the entire investigation. The AI's biomechanical assessment revealed patterns that raised serious questions about the long-standing man-in-a-suit explanation. Human movement follows well-understood rules. Our bodies are built around a specific skeletal structure, muscle arrangement, and center of gravity. When we walk, our legs move in predictable arcs, our arms naturally swing to balance motion, and our weight shifts in consistent ways. These characteristics are measurable across virtually all human populations. And most importantly, a costume cannot change them. A person wearing a suit may look different, but underneath, they still move like a human being. The distribution of weight remains the same. The balance points remain the same. The mechanics of walking remain the same. When researchers compared the figure in the Patterson-Gimlin film against established human biomechanical models, unexpected differences emerged. The stride length appeared unusually long for a creature with legs of that apparent size, suggesting a body structure unlike that of an ordinary human. The arm movement was also unusual. The figure's arms swung through wider ranges of motion than typically observed in human walking, hinting at different limb proportions or shoulder mechanics. And maybe one of the greatest mysteries in North American folklore has been standees.